Greetings, fellow human, Missy here. And if you are interested in finding out if you are stuck in a rut, or if you know that you are and you want to find out how to get out, then I made this video just for you. I want to start off with a story from my life in the last week, which helps to illustrate how we can really easily get stuck in a rut in actually quite silly ways sometimes. Now, to start the story off, it's important to know that for as long as we have lived in this house, which has been many years, I've been really lucky and had a room to myself to have my office in. But recently, for various reasons, we've had to shift things around in the house and shift rooms and furniture around. And my office ended up being moved to our spare room, which is a really big room and had a queen size bed and everything for a spare room for guests in it. But then my office was also moved there. So my desk, my computer, all of those things. I also use my office space as an exercise space. So I have a really big, lovely rubber mat that I roll out. And there was more than enough space for that before. But in this new space that I was sharing with the spare room, I couldn't fully roll that mat out. And although I told myself everything was fine, it honestly felt a little bit cramped. But I lived with it because that's just what we decided to do. So things carried on like this for a while, and I kept telling myself that I was perfectly happy with my new office. Everything was fine. I was lucky to have the space. It was very nice. Everything worked well. We had a lovely space for guests. But then came the time that I decided that I would like to start filming YouTube videos. And my office is the best space to do that. But that did involve a giant queen size bed in the middle of where my tripod would need to be set up. So every week when I want to film a video, I've been pushing this giant bed out of the way. And then the bed is in the space where I need to be able to reach my PC. So before I can use that again, I need to shift the bed back. So it is just chaos on a filming day. And the only time that I have for filming is when my little tot is sleeping. So all of this happens during nap time, the moving, the filming, the moving back, everything in this short amount of time. And it's just this huge amount of pressure to get everything done. Another problem with this whole situation is that when guests do come to visit, I don't have access to my office. I have to go in when the guests are not in the room to be able to get my work done and do things because I'm then technically sharing their space. Now, all of this would have been absolutely fine if there was no other solution, if there was no other space in the house for things to be, and everything had to be in this particular room. But I haven't told you the best part yet. There is, in fact, another room in the house that we could use as a guest room. But because we had decided to do it this way, and because we were using the other room to sort of put odds and ends in that we didn't really know where else to put them, I just carried on like that, even though I was unhappy. But one day I started to question it. I asked myself why I was continuing on in a way that wasn't working when there was an alternative. And two things came up for me. The first thing was that I wanted an aesthetically pleasing, spacious room for my guests to be in when they visited. And the second thing was deeper. It was this feeling that this room is so big, and how can I think that I can take up all that space just for myself? How selfish would that be? To put my guests into a really small room in the house, and here I have this really big room and I just use it for my office and to do my exercises in. Who did I think I was to be physically and metaphorically taking up so much space? But then I realized that this is my home. I live here. My guests don't live here. There is a perfectly good solution, and I decided to do it. I decided to just put all of that aside, and I decided that if it didn't work, I could just move back. So everything was moved, and my guests now have a very cute, cozy little room to visit in, which would meet all of their needs, but is not spacious and is not necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing. I have moved a lot of that clutter that was really bothering me in that room and spread it out throughout the house. I mean, I'm not talking clutter that's useless. It was really useful things. It's just they ended up all in that one room. And now they are spreading places that I think if people visited, they would be like, oh, what's that doing there? But it serves our family. It's practical. It works for us. And it's not cluttering up one room anymore. It's spread, and these useful things are in places where we need them instead of pushing them all into a room because they don't look nice. I realized in all of this that I got stuck in a rut because I was so concerned about everybody else, what other people's opinions were, what they would think when they walked into my house, and what they would think when they were in their very tiny, cozy little guest room. And I had this huge space for my office. And I realized that it had so much to do with the way that I thought about myself, that somehow I couldn't take up space in my own home, even though it was available. Now, enjoying this wonderful big new space that I have to utilize, I rolled out my exercise mat to its full area. And as I was exercising and thinking about all the different spaces in the room I could now use to film without having to shove a giant queen size bed out of the way, I was thinking about how this transfers to other situations in our lives, other places where we just get stuck because we've been doing it that way, because we think there's no other way, or because we don't even realize that we're stuck. So we don't even think to question that there might be another way. I thought to myself, why do we get stuck in these ruts? And how can we spot them and how can we change them? In other words, how can we tell when we're just continuing to do something that doesn't serve us, even though there are other options out there, better options for doing that thing? And when we do finally question it, how do we actually focus on changing it? Now, all of this got me thinking way, 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 way back to when I was 18, going into young adulthood, and I used to watch the Dr. Phil show. Now, I know that he's not everybody's cup of tea, and also maybe you've never even heard of him, but the thing that stood out to me was remembering that he would always say to people, and how's that working for you? And that really stuck with me. And in my youthful ignorance, I thought that I understood. I thought it was very straightforward. If you're doing something that's not working for you, like it's bad for you, stop doing it. How's that working for you? But I realize as I'm getting older that it's far more complex than that. Sometimes we don't even know to ask ourselves, how's that working for you? And when we do, we don't sometimes dig deep enough into the answer to that. And then we don't change what's not working, even though we realize that there may be better options out there, because change is hard. What we need to do is to learn to look at things differently. We need to learn to be curious about things, be curious about things that we've always done that way. We need to take a step back from things, and we need to be honest with ourselves and look at things a little bit more objectively. And we need to focus on finding solutions and on seeing change as something that can be incredibly positive with the right mindset, as opposed to something that's scary and hard. So, how does this look practically? Well, the thing is, this is a really, really huge topic, and there are so many ways to spot these things and so many ways to change them. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to focus on three broad types of ruts that you can get stuck in and some ways that you can try to get out of them. Firstly, you might be getting stuck in a rut in terms of your physical environment. And that was illustrated in that story that I shared in the beginning about my office. We get so used to having our physical environment be a certain way because that's just the way that it's been for however long. And we need to start seeing it through a different lens. Now, this could be any space that you physically occupy and that you have control over how it's arranged and organized. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to focus on your home. What you can do to see your home through a completely different lens is to take a tour of it as if you don't live there. This is a friend's house and you are seeing it for the first time. And as you're walking around room by room, seeing everything, think about the possibilities. Think about, wow, look at this person's house. This is a really nice house. What would I do if I lived here? What would I change? Where would I put things? And do all of this considering your current situation. If you live with other people, if you have a family, think about them. Think about your current financial situation. What could you afford to change? Think about practical, small, little things that are easy to change, that wouldn't cost anything. Think about how you could make the space the most comforting, the most comfortable, and the most practically useful space for you and whoever else you might live with. How this looks practically is looking into a room and maybe seeing some marks on the wall that you didn't notice before that you could just take a cloth and clean off. Maybe it's seeing better ways to arrange your furniture or to store things, or maybe it's spotting things that don't really serve you anymore, don't serve a purpose in your home, and maybe you could sell those things or pass them on to somebody who could actually use them. Maybe they're just taking up space. It's about looking around and thinking about how you could make the space more yours and not worrying so much about what other people would think about the things that you prefer or the furniture arrangements you prefer or how you choose to use and decorate your space. It's amazing how a little bit of a change in perspective can completely change the way that you see things and create that excitement and that motivation to change things. And if nothing else, maybe just look at your home and look at the spaces and ask yourself, how's that working for you? How do you put these changes into action? Well, that could be a whole other video, but just to keep it short, it's very important to remember that small steps are the way to get something done. So just doing a little bit, but being consistent with it. You could do it room by room. You could do it little things to big things. You could assign just a few minutes to it every day. And as you go about these changes, hold on to that perspective of somebody who doesn't live here, but thinking about all of these ways you could make it your own, and then realizing, but this is my house. I can actually do whatever I want for myself and the other people who live here with me if you do live with other people. In all honesty, I am really excited to start doing this myself. So if you want to join me, know that I will be doing this as well. And the first thing that I've been thinking about, if this were my house, there would be a lot more fairy lights around the place because fairy lights make me happy. And I am perfectly fine with my guests in the cozy little spare room discussing how weird that is when they visit. Another rut that we tend to get stuck in is the way that we think about other people. Now, there are always going to be people in life who we struggle to get along with, people who rub us up the wrong way for reasons we might not even fully understand, and people that we just don't seem to click with. Recently, my husband pointed out to me that from his perspective, I can be friends with anyone. And I found this really funny and really a strange thing to say because just like everybody else, I also get frustrated with people. I also find some people rude or annoying. And I too can struggle with initial social interactions and find them really awkward. But I thought about it, and I think what he's getting at is that I'm open to changing my mind because I'm interested in people and I know that we all have our own story. So there's a lot behind people's behavior. So if you find yourself stuck in a rut in terms of the way that you think about any particular person, if they annoy you or rub you up the wrong way or they frustrate you, and you would like to change that, and even if that change just helps you get through your workday, then here are two ideas for doing that. Try asking yourself, what is there to like about this person? While you looking at all of their negative qualities, what are you missing? What are you not seeing? The negatives can so quickly overshadow all of the positives about a person. What is good about them? What do you like about them? What do they do that you like? Maybe somebody annoys you because, in your opinion, they overshare. They get onto a certain topic and then they just go on and on and on and on about it. And that frustrates you because the conversation is not moving forward. But something to like about a person like that is that they're obviously very passionate about something, and they've obviously put a lot of time and energy and research into what they're interested in. And I think being passionate about something is something to like about someone. It's a commendable characteristic. And just because you don't share their interest or their passion for the topic doesn't mean that it's not important to them. Or maybe there's somebody who really annoys you because when you speak, it feels like they just don't listen to you. You'll tell them something and then they will respond with something completely unrelated, and you just feel completely unheard. And maybe at the same time, this person will look at a situation and suddenly do something nice for you. They'll suddenly bring you something or make you something or do something that they saw a need for that you didn't necessarily need help with, but they saw something and they tried their best to help with that need. So, to sum it up, ask yourself if you have a balanced perspective of this person who rubs you up the wrong way. Are you seeing both what you perceive as negative and what you perceive as positive? Another thing that you can do is to ask yourself if there are any other explanations for this person's behavior when they are rubbing you up the wrong way. Yes, it could very well be that they are just plain rude or that they don't like you, or it could be that they have a lot on their plate right now and they're distracted, or they have social anxiety, or they're intimidated by you, or they're shy, or they don't feel comfortable sharing more with you right now. Or maybe somebody at work really annoys you because they're always late with their work and that affects your work, and it's just this vicious cycle. And yes, maybe they're just lazy, but maybe they're carrying some trauma with them. Maybe they're completely overwhelmed by what they're carrying with them. Maybe they have got a really, really difficult home situation that they're busy dealing with, and they're completely exhausted, and that's why they're struggling to get through their work. Maybe they haven't had sufficient training in what they're doing, and maybe they don't know how to organize their time and organize their day better. Maybe there are so many other expectations on them at work, and they feel like they need to say yes to everything, and they can't get everything done and they can't balance their day. Now, I'm not saying that these other possible perspectives are excuses for unacceptable behavior. People do need to take responsibility for their actions and their behavior, but they do give us a little bit of insight into the fact that we don't know everything about a person from superficial interactions, and there are so many other possible explanations. And just knowing that from your side when somebody rubs you up the wrong way can make that rub not quite so abrasive. And this does also apply to people that we know very well. Sometimes they do things that are out of character and that are hurtful. And it's also important to remember in those situations that perspective taking is no excuse for hurtful behavior, but it does help us realize that there is probably so much more going on than we realize. We can't possibly understand the full depth of another person and their thoughts and their experiences. So, again, not an excuse for unacceptable behavior, but it does help us see other people in a very different light. And maybe this is the reason why my husband thinks that I can be friends with anyone, because it's very hard to actively dislike someone when you realize that the parts that you dislike are a drop in the ocean of who they really are. And if you do end up getting to know them, you will discover so many more parts of them. And many of those parts will be parts that you actually like. And the parts that you don't like will make a lot more sense. You might even start to like the parts that you thought you disliked. So, next time you are faced with somebody who rubs you up the wrong way, ask yourself, how's that working for you? Finally, you might be stuck in a rut in terms of the way that you think about yourself. And this one is probably the hardest to change, but it is the most rewarding when you do. Let's start with something that you are not satisfied with, but you just keep telling yourself, I've just always been fill in the blank. So maybe the blank is disorganized or lazy or socially awkward, and you just keep telling yourself the same story without questioning it because you've always been like that. And if you've always been like that, then there's nothing you can do about it, right? Wrong. You can do something about it, and you need to start by being honest with yourself. When you catch yourself doing this, saying, well, I've always just been fill in the blank, you can ask yourself two questions. Start by asking yourself, when have I not been this way? So, in other words, when in the past have you actually disproven this to yourself? And the second question is, are there any other explanations for this except that I just am? If you take the example of somebody who constantly tells themselves, well, I've always just been socially awkward, and I can put up my hand here because I would always tell myself that, and sometimes I still fall into that rut. If that person were to ask themselves the first question, so when have I not been like this? They might answer that, well, when they're around people they're comfortable with, they're not socially awkward. Or when they're doing something with other people and their hands are busy, they're not socially awkward. It's easier to talk. So maybe doing a craft with other people or playing a game with other people. Or maybe when they're with people who are like minded, they're not socially awkward. So meeting new people who have similar interests, they have something to talk about, and then they're not socially awkward. And if the person who saw themselves as being socially awkward were to answer the second question about other explanations for this, they would realize that maybe there are so many other factors at play here. Maybe they just don't have the skill set for making small talk yet. Maybe they actually have social anxiety. Maybe they're worried about being judged, or maybe they just need time to learn to trust people before they feel more comfortable opening up to them. You can see from the example that it is really, really easy to get stuck in a rut in terms of the way you think about yourself if you keep telling yourself, well, I've always just been this way. We end up creating something that feels like an incredibly strong, unshakable belief. But when we start to question it, it becomes really flimsy because I guarantee you, you are going to find evidence to the contrary. You're going to find evidence that no, you're not always like that in every situation. And you are going to find some other evidence that there might be other explanations for why you feel that you are whatever you are. Next, what about the things that you would absolutely love to do, but you tell yourself you can't possibly do them, so you just carry on the way that you are? And here I'm not talking about things that are actually impossible for you. So, for example, me being visually impaired, currently there is no way that I'm going to be flying a plane. So, start by being really, really honest with yourself and ask yourself, can I really not do this thing that I want to do? And if the answer is anything like, yes, technically, but then you need to start changing the way that you talk to yourself. Think for a moment about the most kind, encouraging, and empathetic person that you've ever known. And imagine yourself having a conversation with this person about this thing that you really want to do, but you feel like there is just no way you could do this. How would that conversation go? What would they say to you? You can learn from this. Learn to speak to yourself more encouragingly, more kindly, and more empathetically because we are so harsh with ourselves. We don't treat ourselves very well a lot of the time. We don't talk to ourselves very encouragingly. You can learn to be honest with yourself, but at the same time to be kind to yourself. And you can also learn to be compassionate towards yourself. And when you start to do this, you'll be able to see so many ways out of the rut because you are cheering yourself on instead of holding yourself back all the time. For the longest time, I told myself that there was absolutely no way that I could film YouTube videos and put them out for the world to see. I gave myself so many reasons why I couldn't. Things to do with my situation and my personality and my character. And one day, I just decided to get in my own corner. I decided to cheer myself on instead of discouraging myself. I decided to start making plans, finding solutions instead of making all of these excuses for why I couldn't. So if you're talking to yourself in any kind of negative way, again, ask yourself, how's that working for you? If any of this resonated with you and you feel like you are stuck in a rut in any way and you feel comfortable sharing about that, I would love to hear about it in the comments. And I'd also love to hear what your escape plan is for getting out of the rut. If you gained anything from this video, please leave a like. And if you'd like to see more from me, please subscribe so you don't miss out. And if you would like to work with me as your life coach, I turn warriors into warriors, and there's a link in the description with more information on that. Until next time, remember that you, fellow human, can step, climb, or crawl out of any rut that you find yourself in.